Hey there, my friends. I'm gonna do a little unboxing, which is not something I usually do, but this just showed up and I have a few minutes, and I know what it is, and I was gonna do a walkthrough anyway, because I think Jennifer Ball just did one, but I haven't seen this deck around a lot. And I think it might be new. I discovered this in sort of the tarot rabbit hole, as I like to call it, as I look at people's websites and follow one to another. And so this is a new Ciro Marchetti deck. And I don't have any of his tarot decks. I have his Lenormand, the first mass market edition, and I've got his Kipper deck, and then I've got Oracle of Visions. But I don't have any of his tarot decks. For whatever reason, they never sort of entered my collection. So I was looking at his website again after going through the rabbit hole, and I came across this new one, which I wonder if it even has a title on it. I think this is called the Retrospective Tarot. Maybe it will have a name in here. But what this is, and isn't it cool? I love thoughtful packaging, so it comes in a tin. This is it's a retrospective deck of his work. Some of his favorite cards. Here's a signed artist card, and the back. It's a sort of a retrospective of his favorite decks or cards from his various decks over the years, and it's wrapped in this nice sort of satin cloth, and it's got silver gilding. And it's various cards in this one deck. Oh, maybe I'll use this. Well, it's a little wrinkly. I was gonna say I would use it as a background for the video, but it's a retrospective. I guess there isn't a title card. I'll make sure to put the real title in the description box. So what he did is go through his tarot decks and sort of choose his favorite images and come up with a deck that highlights those, but that is also kind of stylistically similar. So I'm going to zoom in and let's just look at it together. I know there's a couple extra cards in this deck, so there's like a couple choice cards you can make. You can choose between a couple. But there was something about this deck of his that felt just a little more in line with my taste, I guess, ultimately. So, and when I saw this one, I immediately sort of went for it. So here we have the Fool. Now, I don't know what deck each card originally came from, I should say. So it's because I don't have his other decks. But you can see that there's this sort of like beautiful little haze or fog around each one. And so it's not just reprints of existing art. He's taken it and made it into a cohesive whole, which I think is really cool. And it just, like, I always love the richness of his colors. Something about this actually really astonished me in terms of the way he manipulated his existing art and made it feel cohesive and kind of great. So I'm seeing these for the first time. I saw a couple samples on his website and I immediately was like, oh, I'm gonna order this. So it's really cool. This dude looks familiar. So there's two options for the Hierophant, and the cards are not numbered, which is kind of interesting. So in theory, if you don't need or care about sort of the standard deck, you could use both of these cards. But so you've got Faith and you've got a more traditional Hierophant. It's the Lovers, the Chariot, Strength. This I do recognize from something. This might be the cover of the box for one of his decks. There's the Hermit. It reminds me a little bit of like an old map or architectural drawing, which I sort of think is really cool. Justice. Death. Temperance. The light's not bad. There's one smoking devil. Damn. Which, again, I said this in a previous video. I do find the devil sometimes having the traditional meaning, but I also sometimes associate it with sexuality or sex. So certainly you get that feeling there. There's the tower, the star, the moon, the sun, judgment. So this is a Waite-Smith style deck, and of course, you know, I don't read a lot with them, which is one reason why I haven't added his tarots to my collection, to be honest. But you know, I'm at a place right now as a reader where I'm sort of I'm blending a lot of techniques as I read. So I'm using a lot of my Marseille techniques for decks that aren't necessarily Marseille. Like, I'm going to do, at the end of the month, I'm going to do a video on the decks that I really used this month. And there's some Rider-Waite influences there, but also some that are really artistic, not at all Pibbs, but aren't Rider-Waite-Smith either. So I'm just sort of giving myself less sort of like commitment issues to decks and just sort of ordering things. And this has been kind of a bingey month for me. It's the suit of coins. It's nice that we do have some nods to diversity in this deck. I think one of the things that I've always longed for, as I always say with modern artists, is that we have tarots that reflect the world around us. And I do get people questioning why I'm, you know, as a white guy, I focus on that so much, and this is probably where some folks are going to turn off this video, but I feel like it's my job. You know what I mean? It's not the job of people of color to demand that they be included. It's the job of people who recognize you know, the lack of inclusion, you know, to say there needs to be inclusion. So it's a really beautiful 9. And that's the 7. 8. There's the 9. And the 10. And then there's an extra card in each suit, I think, called a Palace card, if I'm not mistaken. There's not really any explanation of what they are, from what I understand. There's the Knight, the Queen, and the King. So if you do have his decks, I don't think there's anything sort of artistically new in this. It's just a blend. Oh, so here, yeah, we have the Palace card. So I'm going to put this aside. So now we get into the Suit of Swords. Again, this, I think, is the cover of a book, isn't it? The 2. I like this 3. You can see in the fog, there's sort of a heart there, but it's not our traditional 3 of Swords, for which I am eternally grateful. I believe there are 2... Yes, there are. So there's 2 editions, actually, of the 3 of Swords. There's this one and this one. I don't know which one I'm going to use. Probably this one, because the tiers are a little, again, sorrowful for that card for me. Here's the 4, the 5, the 6. So for a deck that is made up of other decks in this artist's canon, I think it blends, really. There's a cohesiveness to this. Now, there's a cohesiveness to his art style anyway, you know what I mean? His decks are never not cohesive. But you think about how many tarot decks he's created, and there may even be oracle art, you know, that he's used in these cards as well. So I think that it's interesting that it does feel so of a piece. And again, this 10 of Swords has a Rider-Waite-Smith energy that's familiar, but also is not, you know, 10 swords sticking out of someone's back. There's the Page, and the Knight, and the Queen, and the King. Love those colors. Damn, boy. And then here's the Palace of Swords. I'll put that aside. The Ace of Cups. 2, 3, the Mardi Gras. 4. This guy looks familiar too. the 5, the 6, the 7, 8, 9. I'll tell you why I like this 9, actually, because it looks like a baker or a bartender. And 9 is often associated with effort to me, so I just sort of like that this is sort of clearly someone who works. And then the 10. Page. The knight. So the knights are all sort of helmets, which is cool. The queen. The king. And here's the palace. And then we finally get into the suit of wands. So we've got the ace, the 2, oops, the 3, the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The wand suit, as you can see, is very straight up Waite Smith. So here's the page, the knight, the queen, and the king. And then finally the Palace of Wands. I'm going to put those aside. So that's a little walkthrough really quickly. Again, there's something that I'm pulling this closer to me just for a second. Stand. You can see that there, I think looking at this in person, one of the things that drew me to it is the way that there actually is a slightly more handmade feel to this art that I always enjoy. I like being able to see the artist's hand at work, even if it's digital and not necessarily the artist's hand. So there's something a little imperfect and raw about this that that I like. So it's again silver gilded. You can see that it's kind of sparkly. It's coming off on my hands. But let's give it a shuffle. The cardstock is pretty standard cardstock. I think, you know, it's nice and thin, so it riffle shuffles really well. So yeah, it shuffles really nicely. Can you see all that glitter on my hand? Oh. Be getting glitter off me for days. Painted for the gods. Yeah, that's this deck. Let's lay out some cards. Let's do my 9-card affair. It's a nice size. I think this is a pretty traditional tarot card size. It's borderless, but actually, what I would say is if this were a traditional Ciro Marchetti deck and it were borderless, it might actually be a little too much. I actually like that there's borders on his cards, but because of this sort of scrim-like quality around them, they feel like they're emerging out of the fog. It's got a actually really lovely separation between them, which I really like. And I think the colors, they're rich, but they're balanced. I don't know. I think this is really gorgeous. So I'm happy to have this in the collection and happy I spent the money. It's available right now only through Ciro Marchetti's website. And it is a price that's typical for indie decks, but you know, it does come in this tin and wrapped in this satin, this beautiful gray satin, and it's gilt. You know, it's just the production quality is really nice. The cardstock feels like it shuffles really nice, and it looks really beautiful. I think this could be a nice, really nice springtime deck for folks. And that's a look at the new Ciro Marchetti deck, I believe called the Retrospective Tarot. So be good and have a good week.